Have you ever, like, just reached down and picked up a rough, heavy rock from the ground?
Oh, yeah, sure. Many times.
Right. And, well, did you ever stop and think about the fact that you aren't actually touching it?
Like on a subatomic level.
Yeah. What you're
hmm
feeling, what your brain is literally registering as solid is just the electrons in your own hand fiercely repelling the electrons in that rock.
It's all just force fields, yeah.
Exactly. You're feeling a localized force field. And today, we are going to look at this really radical philosophical framework that argues this exact illusion, the way your brain categorizes and renders reality, is the hidden link between a frustrated friend taking 100 selfies and, believe it or not, the ultimate solution to ending all global wars.
I mean, it sounds almost like an absurd leap of logic when you phrase it that way.
It really does.
Connecting subatomic physics to geopolitical warfare, all through the lens of taking a photograph.
I know. It sounds like three completely different topics just thrown into a blender. The author we are looking at today for this deep dive, Xiaoyang Lin, released an essay on August 9th, 2026.
Right. Correct concepts are the premise of all existence.
That's the one. And Lin actually builds this completely airtight, step-by-step argument. The core premise is that humanity is currently trapped, right?
Yeah.
Trapped by our own faulty definitions of reality.
And the stakes are pretty high.
Huge. He argues that if we can fundamentally shift how we recognize the universe specifically, moving away from, blindly believing in man-made authorities, and instead moving toward a deep understanding of natural law, we can essentially dismantle the psychological machinery that causes human conflict.
It's a massive claim.
It is. So, okay, let's unpack this, because Lin builds this entire thesis from the ground up, starting with that rock I just mentioned.
Yeah, and modern physics has already basically proven that the physical world, at least the way you and I intuitively navigate it, is essentially this very persistent illusion.
It feels so real, though.
It does, but fundamentally, matter is just energy. I mean, Einstein's EM seesaw isn't just some math equation on a chalkboard. It is the literal proof that mass and energy are interchangeable.
Right.
They are just different expressions to the exact same underlying reality.
But the illusion is just incredibly convincing, Like, if I stub my toe on a table, the pain feels absolute. It definitely doesn't feel like a localized force field of energy.
Well, yeah, because your nervous system evolved to keep you alive, not to teach you quantum mechanics, right?
Fair point. Yeah.
On a subatomic level, the atoms in your toe and the atoms in that table are overwhelmingly just empty space.
Which is still so hard to wrap my head around.
I know, but when they collide, those energy fields repel each other, and your sensory organs just send this frantic electrical signal up to your brain.
Just screaming, ouch.
Exactly. Everything you see, hear, smell, or touch is just your brain acting as a biological translator. It takes these fleeting light waves or energy collisions and renders them into a coherent signal that you could actually interact with.
Which basically means the reality you experience in your head is wildly subjective.
Completely subjective.
And Lin brings up this fascinating, tangible example of the peacock feather to prove this point. And honestly, it blew my mind.
Oh, the structural color thing?
Yes, because I always assumed those brilliant golden, green, and blue colors on a peacock were just pigment. Like paint on a canvas.
Most people do, yeah. But if you were to actually grind down a peacock feather, you wouldn't find any green or blue pigment in there at all.
None.
None. The base color of that feather is actually just a very dull kind of brownish black.
Wait, okay, so if there's no green pigment, what exactly is bouncing into my eyes? My brain just hallucinating the color green?
No, it's not a hallucination. It is entirely structural.
What do you mean?
So at a microscopic level, the surface of a peacock feather is coated in these highly ordered crystalline nanostructures, and they function almost like millions of microscopic prisms or tiny little mirrors. When ambient white light hits them, the structures reflect and refract the light, creating these incredibly complex interference patterns.
Like a hologram.
It acts exactly like a hologram.
Yeah.
Depending on the precise angle of the light and, the precise angle you are observing it from, a completely different wavelength of light is bounced into your retina.
That is just wild. The feather itself isn't green. The green only exists as a temporary relationship between the light, the microscopic mirrors, and the physical location of my eyeball.
Yep.
So if I move my head just half an inch, the physical reality of the object completely changes for me.
Exactly. The physical object didn't change its actual makeup, but your rendered reality of it did. And Lin takes this concept of a shifting, subjective reality and applies it to a much more relatable, everyday human situation.
Oh, you mean the selfie story?
Yeah, taking a photo of a friend.
This part of the essay was painfully relatable. So Lynn tells this anecdote about a friend asking for a photograph. Lynn lines up the shot, takes a picture, and shows it to her.
And she instantly hates it.
Hates it.
Yeah.
She says it doesn't look like her. So he tries again. He adjusts the lighting, changes the background, shifts the angle, takes another one.
Still rejected, right.
Right. And eventually he resorts to just holding down the shutter and rapid firing over 100 photos just so she can manually sort through them.
And the punchline there is that out of those 100 distinct physical snapshots of her exact face, she only finds one that she feels accurately represents her reality.
Yes. And from a physics standpoint, every single one of those photos was a perfectly accurate rendering of the light bouncing off her face in that specific millisecond.
Objectively true, yeah.
But psychologically, only one matched her internal concept of herself. It makes you realize that we are essentially all walking around wearing slightly different personalized VR headsets.
That's a really good analogy.
Right. The underlying code of the universe,
Mm-hmm.
the energy, the light waves, is exactly the same for all of us. But the image playing on your specific mental screen is totally unique to you.
Which forces us to confront a rather terrifying philosophical problem, if you think about it.
Yeah, I know where you're going with this.
If the physical world is just energy bumping into energy, and our individual sensory perception is that wildly subjective, how do we prove anything is real?
It's the ultimate question.
How do you even prove that you yourself exist?
That is a rabbit hole. And I know Lynn brings up René Descartes here, the whole I think, therefore I am thing.
The classic.
It's always been the ultimate philosophical safety net, like even if my entire life is a hallucination, even if I'm just a brain in a jar, the mere fact that I possess the ability to doubt my own existence proves that some version of I must exist to do the doubting.
Descartes provides a great starting point for self-recognition, for sure. But Lynn argues that this framework is actually entirely incomplete.
Really? How so?
Well, self-recognition might prove your existence to yourself, but it does absolutely nothing to establish your existence in reality.
But wait, Descartes was just talking about his own consciousness. If I am sitting entirely alone in a dark room just thinking, I definitely exist to myself, are you saying that if I never leave that room, I effectively don't exist?
Essentially, yes.
Is Lynn arguing that existence is like a multiplayer game?
That is exactly what Lynn is arguing. True, meaningful existence requires social recognition.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
If you have a brilliant thought or a profound realization, but you never write it down, never speak it, never paint it, if you never manifest it into the physical world where another consciousness can recognize it, then as far as human society is concerned, you do not exist.
Wow.
Your thoughts must bridge the gap between your mind and the collective reality.
And Lynn takes this into incredibly modern territory in the essay, bringing up the internet and artificial intelligence.
Yes, because today, societal recognition is completely entangled with digital memory. Our collective reality is stored on servers now.
Right, if you're not online, do you even exist?
Exactly. Lynn posits that if we don't project our thoughts into this digital space, we risk fading from societal existence entirely. And if human civilization continues to evolve, and AI eventually absorbs or replaces the infrastructure of the internet, our ongoing existence might literally depend on whether it is AI's defined mission to remember us.
That's slightly terrifying.
It is. If the system stops recognizing us, our societal existence vanishes.
Okay, I follow the logic that we need others to recognize us. But how does society actually do that? You and I can't just beam raw, formless thoughts into each other's heads. We need some sort of shared operating system.
We do, and that operating system is made entirely of concepts.
Concepts.
Right. Lynn writes that without a concept, a thing fundamentally does not exist to us. Concepts are the tools we use to carve recognizable reality out of the absolute chaos of the universe's energy.
Walk me through how a concept actually carves out reality. If I don't have a concept for something, what do I actually see?
Let's use Lynn's analogy of a fish in a river. You and I possess the concept of a fish. We understand it as this cold-blooded, aquatic vertebrate. It has gills, scales, fins.
Sure.
Because we share that highly specific concept, you and I can stand next to a river, look into the rushing water, point at a shape, and both agree, hey, that is a fish.
Right, we have a shared consensus.
Exactly. We can then study it, categorize its habitat, and communicate about it.
But if my brain literally had no category for those biological traits, if the concept of a fish was just completely absent from my mind, I could stare directly at a salmon jumping upstream, and it wouldn't register as a distinct entity.
Yeah.
It would just be a chaotic blur of motion blending in with the water and the light. It wouldn't exist to me as a thing.
Precisely, and this is why Lin places such an enormous emphasis on freedom of speech in this essay.
Because of consensus.
Right. If concepts are the only way we recognize reality, then the ability to freely discuss, debate, and form shared consensus around those concepts is the absolute most vital function of a society.
Ah, I see.
If communication is restricted, then language ceases to be a tool for shared understanding and becomes a weapon. It allows whoever holds power to force their specific concept, their version of reality, onto everyone else.
Consensus is replaced by coercion.
Exactly.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second here, though.
Go for it.
If I am stranded, completely alone on a desert island, no society, no internet, no one to agree with my concepts, does the island not exist? I mean, a physical rock on that beach is still a rock, even if there is no human society around to name it.
It is a crucial distinction to make. Lin is not suggesting that the physical energy of the rock evaporates when you stop looking at it.
Okay, good.
The subatomic repulsion, the mass that remains, but its meaningful conceptual existence, its reality as a rock that can be classified by geology or used as a tool to crack open a coconut or admired for its shape, that specific reality only manifests because a conscious mind is there to apply a concept to it.
Yeah, I get it now.
On your island, the energy exists, but the rock is a concept you are actively generating.
I see. The energy is objective, but the meaning is entirely conceptual.
Right.
We desperately need concepts to interact with reality. But that sets up a massive collision course, doesn't it?
It really does.
Because what happens when you take this rigid rule of concepts and apply it to the single most debated, historically explosive concept in human history, the concept of a creator?
And this is where Lin's philosophical framework becomes a tool for understanding global conflict. To bridge this, Lin includes a very famous classic philosophical anecdote about a university professor and a student to reframe how we even conceptualize existence, creation, and evil.
I've heard variations of this story before, but reading it in the context of Lin's essay completely changed how it hit me. Break down the mechanics of this argument for the listener.
Sure. So the setup is an atheist professor attempting to box his students into a logical trap. He asks the lecture hall, "Did God create everything that exists?"
And a student answers.
A student naturally answers, "Yes, he created everything." The professor smiles and springs the trap. Well, if God created everything, then God created evil. And since the things we create are a reflection of our own nature, God must inherently be evil.
It's the classic paradox of theology. How can a perfect creator make something horrific?
Right, and the student is momentarily stumped. But then a second student stands up and asks a seemingly unrelated question. "Professor, does cold exist?"
I love this part.
The professor laughs and says, "Of course it exists. Haven't you ever been phrasing?" And the student replies, "Actually, sir, cold does not exist."
Which sounds crazy at first.
It does, but the student explains. According to the foundational laws of physics, what we perceive as cold is simply the absence of heat energy. Cold is just a word we invented to describe the sensation we feel when we lack heat. We can study heat, but we cannot measure cold.
It totally flips the entire premise.
Yeah.
The professor assumes cold is an active force, but it's actually just a deficit.
Exactly. Then the student presses further and asks, "Does darkness exist?" The professor, now a bit cautious, says yes.
And the student corrects him again.
Yep. No, darkness does not exist either. Darkness is merely the absence of light. We can use a prism to study light, break it into multiple wavelengths and measure its speed, but a simple ray of light can pierce a world of darkness and illuminate it. You cannot measure darkness.
I see where the student is going. If cold is just the absence of heat energy, and darkness is just the absence of photons, how does this redefine evil?
The student delivers the conclusion. Evil does not exist as an independent created force. Evil is not a thing that a creator fabricated and placed into the universe.
Wow.
Evil is simply a conceptual term humanity created to describe the state of a human heart that lacks the presence of God, truth, and justice. Just like cold is the absence of heat.
That is a staggering way to view morality. Evil isn't an active entity, it's a structural failure. It's an absence.
Exactly.
And Lin takes this philosophical breakdown and maps it directly back to the analogy of the fish in the river.
Right. Yes. Lin uses this to explain the fundamental conceptual divide between atheism and theism. Because an atheist lacks the concept of a creator entirely, they look at the incredibly complex mechanics of the universe, the rushing river, and they see no fish.
They just see the water.
Right. They see the water moving, they understand the currents, but they perceive no underlying architect. Theists, however, possess the concept of a creator. They look at the river and they clearly see the fish.
But just seeing the fish hasn't exactly resulted in a unified, peaceful human history. If anything, it's caused the exact opposite.
Because while theists share a broad concept of a creator, their specific, granular concepts of who that creator is differ wildly. One group says the fish is red, another says it's blue, another demands you worship the river itself.
Right, and here comes the conflict.
Exactly. And because people tie their societal existence to their concepts, they will fight to the death to prove their specific fish is the only real one. This fracturing of concepts is the root of countless religious sects, historical disasters, and ideological wars.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If religion after religion claims to have the absolute true concept of a creator, and history proves that this dogmatic approach just leads to endless violence, how does Lynn suggest we actually break the cycle?
Lynn offers a deeply radical solution here. The essay states that we must completely abandon the concept of blind belief.
So, moving away from just trusting authority.
Yes. The world desperately needs to push toward a faith that is built entirely on understanding rather than the traditional archaic emphasis on simply believing in a God's existence first.
Why is believe at first faith so dangerous in Lynn's view? Is it just naive?
It is worse than naive. Lynn argues it is fundamentally wrong. Blind, unquestioning faith is incredibly fragile, and it leads society directly into the trap of worshiping what Lynn calls man-made gods.
What exactly constitutes a man-made god? Because presumably every religion believes their god is the true one, not a man-made one.
In Lynn's framework, man-made gods are conceptual traps built out of human greed, the unequal distribution of resources, and the desire to control human freedom.
Oh, so it's about power.
Entirely. If a religious or political authority tells you that you must blindly believe their dogma without questioning it, without understanding the mechanics behind it, they are demanding submission. They are stripping you of your intellectual freedom.
And that leads to war.
Yes. Believing in these manufactured, authority-based gods is the primary driver of today's worldly conflicts.
It reminds me of, like, following a GPS system.
How so?
Well, blind faith is like blindly obeying a GPS that is directing you to drive off a cliff simply because the screen says road ahead. You aren't processing reality. You are just following an authority.
That's a great way to look at it.
What Lynn is suggesting sounds like looking out the windshield, understanding the physics of gravity, recognizing there is no bridge, and hitting the brakes.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. To correct this reliance on man-made authority, humanity must return to the God of nature.
The God of nature.
Right. The true creator, according to Lynn, is not some anthropomorphic figure sitting on a throne demanding obedience. The true God is the underlying natural laws and rules of the universe, the unchangeable code of reality.
Wait, are we talking about worshiping gravity and thermodynamics? Because that sounds less like faith and more like a physics textbook.
Well, no, it is not about worshiping the math itself. It is about revering the architect through the architecture.
Oh, like that.
Lynn states explicitly that the process of thinking about the creator is the exact same process as understanding natural laws. We have to use scientific research, logic, and deep inquiry to get closer to this truth.
Even if we can't understand it all.
Exactly. Now, ordinary people might never comprehend the infinite complexity of the universe. It's too vast. But the direction of our faith must be toward understanding, rather than blind submission.
So blind faith is like memorizing the answer to a math test without knowing how to do the math.
Yeah.
It falls apart the second the question changes. But understanding natural law means you actually know the formula.
Yes, beautifully said.
But practically speaking, how does understanding natural law actually stop a war? Like philosophically, shifting our faith to natural law sounds beautiful. But mechanically, on a geopolitical level, how does understanding physics or natural law actually stop a dictator from invading a neighboring country?
It dismantles the psychology of war by creating a chain reaction of personal responsibility. Lynn calls this mechanism the contract spirit.
The contract spirit. Walk me through the mechanics of that chain reaction. How do we get from understanding natural law to ending a border dispute?
It starts with the mind. Thought leads to the creation of concepts.
Okay.
Concepts allow us to make informed choices. And making a choice inherently demands taking responsibility for the outcome of that choice.
Thought, concept, choice, responsibility.
Yes, that sequence is the foundation of the contract spirit. It is the absolute bedrock of modern law, civilization, and social progress.
It's the agreement that actions have objective consequences.
Exactly. And Lin divides the entire world into two distinct camps based on their relationship with this concept. First, you have those who lack true faith, the people who worship the man-made gods of power, ego, and authority.
And they lack the contract spirit.
They fundamentally lack the contract spirit.
What does a society led by someone lacking the contract spirit actually look like?
They are purely opportunistic. They only honor a contract or an agreement when the outcome benefits them. But inevitably, things go wrong, right? An economy collapses, and agricultural policy fails.
Sure, natural consequence.
Right. But when they experience a negative outcome, they absolutely refuse to accept the natural consequences of their own actions. Instead, their ego forces them to look outward. They blame their neighbors, they blame minorities, they blame foreign powers.
This constant scapegoating.
Yes. Lin asserts that this psychological mechanism of blame shifting, this refusal to accept natural consequences, is the direct cause of all global conflicts and wars.
So if a dictator's agricultural policy fails and people are starving, instead of admitting they didn't understand the natural laws of economics or farming, they claim a neighboring country sabotaged them, and they launch an invasion to steal resources.
You nailed it.
The war is just a massive, violent manifestation of a fragile ego refusing to accept reality.
Exactly. Now, compare that to the second camp. Those who have built their faith on understanding and who truly revere natural law. These people possess the contract spirit. If they experience a failure or a bad outcome, they don't look outward for a scapegoat.
They look inward.
They look inward. They realize they must have miscalculated the natural laws. They recognize the failure as a deficit in their own understanding.
Like if a bridge collapses, it wasn't sabotage, it was a failure to respect the laws of physics and materials.
Right. They seek to improve themselves and expand their knowledge rather than lashing out violently at others. To cement this divide, Lin uses a very striking quote from the author W. Somerset Maugham in the essay. You revere the laws of nature, he worships authority.
Wow. You revere the laws of nature, he worships authority. That quote perfectly encapsulates the entire essay. If you worship authority, you are bound to a fragile man-made ego that will eventually require violence to sustain itself.
Correct.
But if you revere the laws of nature, you are bound to an objective reality that demands learning and adaptation. So, what does this all mean? Basically, every geopolitical conflict, and maybe even our own personal arguments, boils down to a breach of this contract spirit, a refusal to accept natural consequences.
It is a remarkable synthesis of physics, philosophy, and sociology. I mean, we started by recognizing that our physical perception, matter, color, even a photograph is inherently subjective.
The VR headset we all wear.
Exactly. Because our perception is subjective, we rely on shared concepts to anchor our existence in society. But when we apply that need for concepts to the idea of a creator, we trap ourselves in blind, dogmatic belief systems that lead directly to historical bloodshed.
But by pivoting our faith away from those man-made authorities and directing it entirely toward the pursuit of understanding natural law, we force ourselves to adopt the contract spirit.
And that changes everything.
Right. We eliminate the need for blame, and by eliminating blame, we eliminate the psychological root of war.
And if humanity can achieve that shift, Lin argues, we will finally step off the cycle of destruction and enter a true track of high-speed, unified development as a species.
That is an incredibly empowering framework, and it's something you can apply to your life today. Next time you face a failure or a massive conflict, ask yourself, are you looking outward and blaming others, worshiping at the altar of authority and ego? Or are you looking inward, revering the laws of nature and figuring out how to adapt and learn?
It is a difficult, lifelong practice, for sure. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final, slightly provocative thought that builds on Lin's theory of concepts.
Go for it. Let's hear the final thought.
Well, Lin argues that without concepts, things simply don't exist to us, right? Our entire reality is heavily restricted by the biological categories our brains can render.
Right.
Earlier, we discussed the very real possibility of human society evolving, perhaps eventually merging with artificial intelligence or advanced cybernetics.
The whole AI remembering us thing.
Yeah. So if that happens and our sensory perception is completely blown open, if we are no longer limited to seeing just a tiny sliver of light waves or hearing a narrow band of frequencies, what happens to the laws of nature we currently revere?
Oh, wow.
Do the laws themselves fundamentally change because our conceptual framework changes? Or do we just finally get to see the full, unedited source code of the universe for the very first time?
Are we just waiting for the ultimate hardware upgrade to realize the God of natural law is infinitely more complex than we could have ever conceptualized? That's a wild thought to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. Stay curious, question the concepts you rely on, and keep exploring the nature of your reality.